Well, good day and welcome to you. It is September the 20th. I hope you're having a great day wherever you are. My name is Gary Willing. I want to welcome you to Search for Signs. If you are new, welcome you back if you have been here before. And as always, just let you know if you want to know more about what we talk about here on Search for Signs, I have included links that give you wonderful background information in the description portion of these videos to at least help you start with your investigation if that's something you want to do. They're there for you if you want. Now, I'd like to take a moment and thank HOHNR 2020 Studio Now, Peaceful Energy, Mark Hill, and Spirit Watcher 178. I think that's everybody who commented since the last time I put a video up. Thanks so much. And as always, if you have a comment you'd like to post your comment. Everyone's welcome to do that. If you have a question, post your question in the comment section or email me at searchforsigns@mail.com. Or I guess the other way of joining the discussion is just to sit there, listen, and just contemplate and see if there's any truth to this for yourself. All right. Now, you can do it however you want to do it, but anyway, I always encourage questions and comments too. The last few videos I put up, I had some wonderful but challenging questions to try to answer. This go round, I don't have any questions because maybe I did such a good job of answering the last few questions. Nobody has any questions this time. But be that as it may, I want to do some talking here. Maybe this video will be like me kind of coming up for a little bit of air. But I wanted to read an article coming from Benjamin Creme's master entitled The Future Beckons. And I wanted to kind of set it up a little bit because even though he explains it way better than I can explain it, I do want to kind of set it up for those of us who want to know more about this information, I guess. But when it comes to looking at this and hearing this maybe for the first time, or even if you've heard it before, you might be thinking wrongly that this has to do with some kind of new ideology, that I'm promoting some kind of ideology to change yours. And that's not at all what the case may be, okay? This really has to do with the problems that are facing humanity. Now, not to sound like a Debbie Downer, but of course we all have our own issues. We have financial issues, we have health issues perhaps, family issues if we got a family, living condition issues, whatever it happens to be, we got problems we got to deal with on our own, right? But then there are also problems that are facing all of us together, universally, and problems like the environment, economic divisions, political divisions, terrorism, war, political instability, those kind of things. We're all facing together. And if you really think about it, this is the first time in human history that we have had problems that we have to face as a humanity, as one humanity. Throughout history, it's always been a group that had a problem, that they had to overcome or something to that effect, right? But it was never everyone together. And that's why I do think the bright side to all this, the silver lining to the problems that are facing humanity, is that I believe they're teaching humanity that we are one. Now, Maitreya has said a few things about the problems of the world and how to solve those problems. He says, the problems of the world are real but solvable. Man must just act and implement his will. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to touch on is he says that the people of the world are really ahead of the governments of the world. So if you're waiting for our world leaders to do anything about the problems that are facing humanity, we're going to be waiting a really long time because I don't think they have any interest in solving those problems. Because, as history has shown us, they haven't solved it yet. So evidently, they have no interest in solving the problem. It's going to take humanity coming together to do this. And this article talks about that very clearly, about Maitreya's role in waking humanity up to the problems of the world. So the other thing is, how do we solve the problems, right? Well, Maitreya's solution to the problems that are facing humanity, it's very simple. And it starts with what he says is the principle of sharing. If you're not familiar with it, I'm going to talk a little bit about it, offer just a little bit of proof that what he's saying is true. But he says, without sharing, there will be no justice. Without justice, there will be no peace. And without peace, there will be no future. So our very future depends on whether we can create peace or not. Now, if you look throughout the world over the last few decades, millions upon millions of people every year march for justice. Millions upon millions of people in the same amount of time every year march for peace. But how many people are looking at the principle of sharing? I would say little to none. Unfortunately, if what Maitreya is saying is true, and I'm going to offer up some evidence that it is, justice and peace will never be created on this planet and established on this planet until we try the principle of sharing. Now, I do think that Maitreya's role in all this will be to show humanity that that is the most important thing that we need to start, is the principle of sharing. We can't solve the problems of the world at all until we start the principle of sharing, because it's going to take nations trusting one another better than they do today in order to solve these problems. So, I talked about it before, I'll talk about it in this video, and I'm sure I'm going to have to talk about it again because it's an important thing to think about and contemplate on. Does sharing bring about peace? Well, historically, if you look right after World War II, the United States had just beaten out the fascists and the Nazis in World War II. Now, the United States was looking at Europe, and Europe was in shambles. Their economies were in shambles. Their cities were razed and everything. I mean, it was in ruin. And had the United States just gone back to doing what they wanted to do, they were saying that Europe could eventually go back into another world war. Now, this time, it would be even worse because Russia and the United States both had nuclear weapons. And if that was the case, then they might have been used at that time. Or who knows, maybe this war would have taken even longer than it did for World War I and World War II. So what they did was they derived a plan. It was called the Marshall Plan. And the reason why it's called the Marshall Plan is because the guy that came up with this name was George C. Marshall. Why not put your name to it, right? But the plan that he came up with was the United States would give excesses of their resources to Western Europe to help rebuild Western Europe. And then when Western Europe was ready, they could give back in payment what excesses that they were creating. So they did just that. It rebuilt Western Europe. Western Europe paid back in payment what they initially took by giving excesses of their resources. Now, here's something that Ben's Master talks about in this article that I want to just point out if you're going to listen to this whole article that I read. He talks about how when the principle of sharing takes place, it will not only help the developed world or the developing world, it will also help the developed world. Because if you look right after World War II with the Marshall Plan, it not only helped Western Europe, it created an economic boom in the 50s. So where do you think all these people could afford to have babies and the baby boomers? It all came from that economic boom. Right? So it does help the nations that start to share. But if you look at it long term, it only lasted for 4 years. But the long term result of the Marshall Plan was nations like the United States, England, France, Germany, Portugal, Spain, Italy, they trust one another now better than they did before the Marshall Plan. None of those nations have attacked one another now since the implementation of the Marshall Plan. Even though it ended after 4 years, we still trust those nations better. The peoples of those world can travel easier to those nations than they can to any other nations on the planet. So that, I think, is evidence of what the teacher is saying. Without sharing, there will be no justice. Without justice, there will be no peace. Now, here's the other thing to look at. The peace that he's saying, at least initially, will look like nations that trust one another a little bit better, with a little bit of goodwill. It doesn't have to be a perfect manifested peace before we can perhaps solve the environmental problem. It's just that nations have to learn to stop competing against one another like we've been doing. But once that happens, we can solve those problems. And if we did this ongoingly and all around the world, according to the masters, it would start to help manifest unity on this planet, which will eventually bring about, at some point, manifested love on planet Earth. Even though it seems like a utopian idea, it starts with the principle of sharing. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there to you. But if you're looking at the problems of the world and you feel overwhelmed, you don't feel like we're gonna fix it in time or whatever, hopefully this information will give you a little bit of hope that we can do something about it, but hopefully it will also motivate you that when the time comes, that we all need to do something to help bring this about and not just wait for somebody else to do it. So now, This article, like all the other articles I read, you can read them by going to the Share International site. This is entitled "The Future Beckons." From time to time, I have spoken of the need to inculcate the spirit of sharing, whereby the world's resources can be more equitably distributed. This would lead to a reduction of tension and of incalculable human suffering. It would also bring about a revitalization of the life and of the economies of the already developed nations. The lifeblood of the planet must circulate. The stagnant economies of the richer nations can only be galvanized into motion through the recognition that the poorer nations, too, have a right to live and to enjoy a reasonable standard of life. Only sharing can make this so. Daily, the evidence mounts to show men that the world is one, that humanity is an organism whose well-being depends on the health of every part, and that to ignore the signs of danger and of disease is no longer possible or wise. Many now see this and call for justice, but only the cry of awakened humanity will suffice to shift the powers from their positions of greed. Soon the world will know for certain that men must share or perish. Maitreya will lose no time in bringing home to all this truth. He will show men that the world belongs to everyone, rich and poor, powerful and dispossessed, white and colored. He will make clear the need for concerted action to solve the problems which confront man today, and will point the way to their solution, calling upon all men to accept the need for change. He will quicken the aspiration and focus the will of men everywhere to see justice done. Thus will he unite all those who seek the establishment of better forms through which the divinity of man can be expressed. And from that multitude will rise a cry unlike aught heard before on this earth, a cry for justice and truth, freedom and peace. Then will the leaders respond, and in growing momentum, this world will be transformed. Thus will it be. Thus will Maitreya lay the foundation of the new civilization based on sharing and love. Can you not feel the new rhythm which is entering your lives? Who can ignore the new impulse which quickens men to action? All will be remade, and soon the darkness will give way to revealing light. All who can respond to the needs of the time will find a place. This the law of service guarantees. No one who longs to serve need fear lack of work or purpose, nor the willing guidance of experienced hands. We shall help you to restore this world to health, and shall work as brothers at your side, clearing away the debris of the past. Soon the world will see great changes taking place, and will know that the new age has begun. The old is a passing away, and the future beckons mankind. No one need fear that future, for it holds for man the promise of his divine heritage, and the establishment everywhere of the will of God. Serve and realize that future for yourselves and your brothers. Serve and know you are working in unison with God's will. Serve gladly and wisely, and enter into freedom and joy. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.